Today I'm going to show you how to create a French seam when you only have 1/2 inch of seam allowance. Now, while this is not ideal to have such a small amount of seam allowance, sometimes it happens. Sometimes the fabric is already cut, sometimes the pattern is already made, or it is what it is. But I'm going to show you an easy way to create it with only 1/2 inch seam allowance. The first thing you want to do to create your French seam is you want to have your wrong sides together. So this fabric's super easy to tell which is the wrong side. Next, I'm going to sew my first seam line, or stitch line rather, at 1/4 inch. On my machine, 1/4 inch is right at the edge of the presser foot, which makes it super easy. So now that I have that seam line created, I'm going to press it really quick. First thing I want to do is just by using my fingers, I'm just going to press the seam down. And I'm going to take the hot iron and press it super flat. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fold these two pieces back together, and I'm going to trim off about 1/16 inch of the edge of the fabric. The only reason I pressed it first is just because it becomes a lot easier. Once you have a super tiny seam allowance, it just can be hard to get the iron to press it correctly. So doing it this way helps. So next I'm going to just cut off. And I'm just going to press it one more time, just for good measure. Next, I'll fold the fabric right sides together. I'm going to press it again, making sure that this is perfectly straight. Is nice and flat. I'm going to go back to the sewing machine. I'm going to take this and I'm going to sew it again at another 1/4 inch. So both of these seams at 1/4 inch have created our 1/2 inch seam allowance. Also, just as a side note, the reason I trimmed off some of that seam allowance on the other side is just to make sure that nothing pokes through accidentally. If you do this perfect, you shouldn't have to trim, but I usually do just for good measure. So with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm going to sew all the way down. So once this is opened up, we'll see we've got this nice clean seam on the front end, and then we've got this nice pretty encased seam in the back. So I'm just going to press it one more time. Now when you're pressing the finished French seam, you can just pick a side. Generally, if you're creating a garment, you want the seams to go towards the center of the body. But if you're creating a handbag or something like that, it doesn't necessarily matter. So there we have it, a beautiful French seam.